Good afternoon, everybody. Spiritual here, broadcasting from sunny Florida. I hope y'all are well. I wanted to bring attention to a topic that I don't generally discuss, but I think it's extraordinarily important. Simply understanding humanity at its default, at its baseline. Humanity as it was originally before all things modernization. And a lot of people are unaware of a lot of these fundamental realities, and it causes them not to understand some of their own personal challenges and not to understand society in general. And so, Sebastian Younger, the guy on the left, all the way on the left there, is a journalist. He actually wrote the Perfect Storm. And I saw him on the Joe Rogan Experience back when I used to watch that years ago in my mid 20s, somewhere around there. And a couple of the YouTube episodes impacted me so much that I actually bought the book. And for me to buy a book, based on a podcast, it has to really be very compelling and interesting to me. So I read his book called Tribe, and it really helped me because I was confused about a lot of things. Why are so many people discontent? Why do so many people feel like their lives are meaningless or their jobs are meaningless? Just simple questions like that. And this, believe it or not, this 11 and a half minute video or 15-minute video, whatever it turns out to be, it answers a lot of the questions. And so let's get into it. I'm going to comment on specific details. I hope it's helpful for a lot of people, especially the younger humans out there who are trying to make sense of an increasingly complex world amid a highly complex and comprehensive transition. So as we go into transhumanism, let's try to remember default humanity and try to make sense of it all together.
My understanding of humans is that we are social primates that prefer to live in groups of about 50 people in a challenging environment. That's what human beings are. Humans do not survive alone in the wild. A lone human in nature is a dead human, right? We're primates. We're social primates. A lone primate in nature is a dead primate, and for most of the species. And we get our safety, our protection, from the fact that we work very, very well in groups. We don't have long claws. We don't have sharp teeth. We can't run very fast. We can't climb trees worth a damn. We're extremely vulnerable, and we get our safety and our dominance in the natural world from our ability to work in a group. So if you're necessary to that group, you're safe. If you want to know what we were evolved for, you can look at modern-day hunter-gatherers who more or less anthropologists agree represent our evolutionary past, and you'll find that there's at least 2 hours of pretty vigorous movement every day, fast walking, basically, 2 hours a day by virtually everyone in the community. Like on average, men and women moved like vigorously for 2 hours a day, usually walking quickly, right? That's what our bodies are designed for, and it's what, if we do that, we're tuned up at that level, right? Where our mind feels good, our bodies feel good. And if you don't do that, I mean, you can lay around all day, but it will not. You will experience a psychological deficit and a physical deficit. You are almost never out of contact with, out of physical proximity with other people that you know extremely well. There's about 4 or 5 hours a day devoted to survival, food gathering, that kind of thing. We work 8-10 hours a day, right? The most, quote, primitive hunter-gatherers in some of the harshest environments in the world spend around 4 hours a day surviving. But survival is a group endeavor. It brings everyone together. Everyone's needed. High protein, low, no processed foods, obviously. The diet, obviously, it's a very pure diet. And people who live like that have extraordinarily good health. And if they survive, childbirth in those first early years, often live into their 70s, 80s to 90. I mean, basically live as long as Westerners do, with no medical intervention. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary.
So if humans used to spend 4 hours a day dedicated to survival, kind of just survival maintenance, tending to all the things that need maintaining or what have you, such as food supply, such as water supply, whatever the case may be, getting firewood. um, it wasn't, people were not working 10 hours a day, and people were certainly not working 10 hours a day in a plastic cubicle or some kind of office by themselves. They were working with people they know extremely well, basically their family. And so it was not, I imagine, as miserable as some of these computer-facing jobs that the laptop class does, for example.
Yeah, keep in mind that all those emotions, everything we are, had survival value in our past, or we wouldn't have those things, right? We're the legacy of an evolutionary process that went on for 2 million years. So if we feel sadness, if we feel anger, if we feel shame, all of those things had survival value for humans, and the individuals that had the capacity for those emotions made better citizens within their little community, were better hunters, were better whatever. And so those emotions, we find them meaningful, but actually what they are is they helped us survive.
One of the things that I've been dwelling on a lot lately is how important struggle is. And for me personally, I do a lot of things, and I do a lot of things that I'm terrible at. And I feel like the more happy I am is when I just get slightly better at that's when I feel like little bits of progress.
That is exactly how we're wired to react to success. And if you sort of think about it, think about us as a species, as an animal. If you're presented with a challenge and you get a little dose of endorphins, of dopamine, or some feel-good chemicals when you do a task well, that will encourage you to keep doing that task and keep looking for success, small successes in your life, which is exactly how people adapt and survive in harsh circumstances. I mean, and again, in terms of evolution, if doing something successfully produces a chemical reaction that feels good, a little bit of dopamine, or in terms of communal connection, a little bit of oxytocin, the trained monkey that we are will continue doing that good thing. So basically, the tasks that helped with survival get rewarded with neurochemicals that feel good.
Yeah.
And the things that are dangerous to us and lessen our chance for survival don't feel good. So being isolated, being alienated from your group, being an outcast feels bad. And your survival chances go down, right?
Right.
You don't want to stay in that place. You want to join the group again. And so there's these neurochemical reward incentives and punishments that get sort of herd people towards behaviors that help survival. Doing things, accomplishing things, building things, that all feels good. It's clearly what we needed to do in our evolutionary past, and it's reinforced.
So the brain's job is to keep the body and the brain alive. So actions and inactions that support that cause are rewarded with favorable or pleasant chemicals being released into the brain, or into the body rather. Actions and inactions that do not support the cause of survival are sometimes punished. So, to bring it to the present day, for example, if someone is in their house not doing anything productive and not communicating with any other humans, they may feel anxiety or they may feel guilt. And it's because what they're doing, the brain knows, is not supporting the objective of survival. But sometimes the emotions are more exaggerated than they should be, because we have the same wiring that we had 25,000 years ago. So it's kind of like we have a system that's not compatible necessarily, or not optimally designed for the present day.
When you were writing this book and you were thinking about all the ways that human beings have altered the environment around them, you were saying that, and I've read this before, that genetics, essentially we're riding on the same genetics that were 10,000 years ago from
or
the same
more,
people.
yeah, 20, 25, yeah.
Are we going to change that? Like, are we going to become more compatible with this bizarre and artificial world that we've created?
So our society, our culture is changing way faster than genetic change can happen.
Right.
Right. So we haven't even adapted genetically to the advent of agriculture 10,000 years ago. And now we have so altered our circumstances that survival is no longer a question. And so what do we do with those feelings? What do we do with those capacities, the ability to hunt, the dopamine that you get from hitting a target? I mean, teenage boys will sit in a basement for hours, days, years playing video games. They're training for hunting, right? They're training for hunting and war, and they're getting rewarded with dopamine, which is exactly what should have been happening for 500,000 years. And now there's nothing to hunt, nothing to fight. They're still doing the behavior as they should because they're wired for it, but there's no useful purpose for it.
There are countless examples in society of people engaging in activities that they don't realize are, in effect, simulations of the activities that they're programmed to do. So first-person shooters would be comparable to hunting, would be comparable to tribal warfare. Football always reminds me of colonial warfare. Two factions lining up and then converging. But this is very interesting because a lot of what people do on a day-to-day basis is really not because they're choosing to do it. It's because they're programmed to do it, and whatever they're engaged in, such as high school football, they're literally programmed to be engaged in that. In other words, humans of the modern age find activities or pastimes that are technically similar to what they're programmed to do, although not the actual activity itself, such as hunting. So young guys playing video games, paintball, airsoft, whatever, football, it's the closest option to what they're programmed to do. They like it because they're programmed to like similar type activities.
The problem with affluent modern society is it takes away all of the tasks of survival, right? No one in this room, I don't think, is having to figure out every morning how to literally physically survive. Where am I going to get the berries I'm going to eat today? Where am I going to go to kill something that I can eat? How am I going to avoid the enemy? Like, we're not thinking like that. And which is an enormous blessing, right? I mean, it's an enormous luxury to live like that. The downside is you don't get this sense of mastery over your circumstances. You actually don't feel responsible for your own survival. You don't feel like you are earning your own survival in the world. You feel like it's being handed to you. And I grew up in an affluent suburb, and I never had a sense as a young man that I was contributing in any way to the fact that I was physically alive on the planet. Well, that's very, very recent in human history that young men could afford to feel that way. It's a blessing, but also a bit of a curse.
It's almost like society as we've created over the last couple of hundred years is almost totally incompatible with human genetics or with the human body or the human spirit or whatever.
Well, if you look at genetics are complicated. I mean, obviously, on some level, modern society is very successful. We have 7 billion of us. But as wealth goes up in a society, as modernity goes up in a society, the suicide rate goes up. The depression rate goes up. Schizophrenia goes up in urban environments. They're not good for the human psyche. We evolved to live in groups of 30, 40 people in a harsh environment, totally interreliant on one another for survival. That creates a huge amount of equality within a group and loyalty within a group. That's what we are designed for genetically. Modern society allows the individual to be independent from the group, which is in some ways a great liberation. In other ways, it can lead to a profound alienation and depression.
So when you hear the expression, oh, we're losing our humanity, humans have lost their sense of humanity, it's partially because the more advanced we get, the less and less we need each other, the less and less we are dependent on one another. That's why I've noticed sometimes wealthy families having a much bigger home will be less close to one another than families on the lower end of the economic spectrum who have a smaller home and are in more of a more intimate setting on the day to day. And families that have less money, they're more dependent on one another. And same with lower socioeconomic communities in general. They're more interdependent. They watch each other's kids. They cover for each other for work, and all these things. So the more advanced we get, the less and less human we become because we lose those default human tendencies and traits, and then we just become these biological machines with emotion.
I mean, the thing about technology is it buffers us from real consequences in the physical world, which is what's great about it, right? And but the downside is that as humans get buffered from consequences, they need each other less and less in order to survive. So now, sort of modern Homo sapiens in a suburban house with an iPhone and a garage door opener and all that stuff, you get a paycheck at work, and you don't need your neighbors, to help you gather food or hunt food or defend yourself from the gang from the other neighborhood. I mean, it all kind of gets taken care of, which is a great liberation from your neighbors, from your community, but it deprives you of that essential human reliance on other people around you. That's what makes people feel good and safe and like they're leading meaningful lives. And so that transition to having a life that's not part of any community, that is a really tough one for people. And I think that's part of the reason for high depression rates and such and high PTSD rates in our society. I wish I was part of a communal group fighting to survive in the wilderness. Like, I mean, I had some taste of that with the platoon that I was with, and that was intoxicating. It has downsides, obviously, and you can't stay out there forever. But it made me at least understand that the source of my dissatisfaction in life wasn't internal. It made sense. It was that I was having a healthy reaction to circumstances in society that humans were not adapted for. And even that was enough to bring a kind of peace of mind for me.
So you, regardless of how much money you would make, you would always move into a neighborhood where people are relying upon each other and stay tight to each other.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
I mean, it's not even
It's no way, like...
It's not even a choice. Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
I just get instantly depressed in affluent neighborhoods.
Wow, that's so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I crash. I mean, hard.
What do I do? Like, what do you tell those people?
I mean, it's really a question of you can't have it all. And well, I mean, what I would say to them is, sell your house, sell your car if you can, move into a community where you have to be interreliant with the people around you, and you have to interact with them every day. Like, that is what makes people feel good. But the thing is, people are understandably not willing to give up the pleasures of an affluent life in order to have social connection. I mean, I get it, right? But you really can't have both very successfully. It's extremely hard to.
Mental illness has never been more of a problem for humans ever. And it's because we are not operating in a way that is compatible with the human way. We're not supposed to be doing a lot of the things that we're doing in the way that we're doing them. It's just not how our brain is designed. And so when I heard an individual like this put it into words, that idea that if you're not thrilled about aspects of life or aspects of your life, it's not necessarily a reflection of you. It's not necessarily some kind of chemical imbalance that the Rockefeller doctors like to talk about, but it's perhaps a reasonable response on your part to a field of existence that is not fit for you, or for you as a human, rather. So I think a lot of people can take comfort in that. So Sebastian spent time in Afghanistan, and there's actually a documentary about it as well. And he was in the most contentious part of the Afghani conflict with the most amount of action, combat. And he realized that when soldiers leave the Marines or whatever military branch and go back to normal society, people think that they have PTSD only regarding the bloody combat scenes that they witness, their friends dying and things. But when they get back to normal society, they're actually mourning their identity, the identity that they have had for however many years. They had meaning and purpose. People depended on them. What they did on the day to day mattered. And that creates an amazing bond between humans when you have each other's back in a way that is life or death. And when they get back home to the United States or wherever, and they do some kind of new job, and they realize how meaningless it is and just how trivial it is and how repetitive perhaps it is, it's very hard for them to adjust. And it's very understandable. They're going from kind of living in the real world and having the real, true human experience, because conflict is there's really nothing more human than conflict, unfortunately. And they're getting that experience, and they're going to kind of a fake, rubber corner existence, and it can be very depressing for them. And Sebastian paints a few very interesting pictures. One is the Blitz, when the Nazi war machine was bombing London. They called it the Blitz because the war tactic was called Blitzkrieg. And the people of the United Kingdom, or what have you, would go into subways and bomb shelters, and they had that real survival-like experience for however long, weeks, months. And people actually reported that they missed those times after the fact. Very similarly to how veterans on September 11, 2001 reported that their PTSD issues basically disappeared during that 48-hour period of uncertainty and chaos. They felt needed, they were on high alert, they were helping others, and it's the same thing with the Blitz story. They felt like the stakes were high and what they did mattered, and they were needed, and they were loved by others. Another interesting tale was how Native Americans would always try to escape when they were kidnapped by colonial settlers. They would always try to escape back to their tribe. Of course, they did not like the polished colonial living, which many would view as counterintuitive, because it's like, wow, you were living in a teepee, living in the dirt, and now you're living in a 2 or 3 story home with a roof and all these amenities, and you don't like it? Oh, wow, that's so bizarre. And then on the other hand, the individuals who were kidnapped, the colonial settlers who were kidnapped by Indian tribes or Native American tribes, they never tried to escape, or very, very rarely did they want to escape and go back to the colonial lifestyle, because the Native American lifestyle, living off the land, surviving in that really natural way, being a part of a tribe that's very close, tight-knit, interdependent, lots of honor and meaning. They didn't want to go back to the more polished, modern way of living. And I thought that was just fascinating. And so I hope this was helpful for people. I'd recommend watching it again because there's a lot of little details in there that you can kind of overlook. But the more we understand about default humanity, as I call it, the more we can understand how to adapt to the modern world, especially as we move into the fourth industrial revolution and transhumanism. It's a very important moment to think about, do I want to go in the direction of more default humanity, what's natural, what works for the human in its default environment, or do I want to go down the path of AI and computers and do something that's not so natural? Now, I expect some of these technologies, or some of these nano pills or whatever they have going on, I suspect some of it will actually be very appealing for many people. For example, an anti-anxiety program where you could literally program your brain to not react as if a dinosaur is chasing them when in reality they just have a midterm exam. Because the brain overreacts. It's like over computes things that are really not appropriate. People should not be feeling the level of fear and anxiety and depression that they are. It's in a lot of cases, from what I've gathered. It's just not appropriate. You should not be hyperventilating because someone commented on a post, or because whatever the case may be. Or someone shouldn't be getting angry and having a temper tantrum because the waitress or the waiter messed up their order, and they're reacting as if you just disrespected their tribe on a level that's like an act of war. So in conclusion, the way we live now, it's difficult for a lot of people because it's really not how we're designed to exist. We're not designed to exist living behind a cubicle for the vast majority of our waking hours and spending a very small amount of time with our family. Kids, sons and daughters, are not supposed to have a father who is not around except 1 hour at dinner time after he gets home from work, and then maybe on the weekends sometimes. It's supposed to be very tight-knit. People are really not supposed to be alone that often. Why would you be alone? When you're alone, there's many threats that the threat level in various categories goes up when you're alone in the wilderness. So I just think, again, understanding some of these fundamental features of default humanity can be very, very helpful in adapting and successfully navigating the modern world. So I hope you thought this was interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I can look at those and perhaps do more on this kind of thing or answer any questions. And I appreciate your viewership, and I will see you on the internet. Take care.
It made me at least understand that the source of my dissatisfaction in life wasn't internal. It made sense. It was that I was having a healthy reaction to circumstances in society that humans were not adapted for. And even that was enough to bring a kind of peace of mind for me.